next speaker is Beverly Carrick, who is co-founder and executive director of Embrace International Foundation. She has 40 years of international experience in Central America, West Africa, East and West Africa, including multiple field assignments in both relief and sustainable development programming. Beverly was co-founder and executive director of Cause Canada from 1984 to 2015 before founding Embrace International. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Nursing from McGill and an MA in Leadership and NGO Management from Trinity Western University. And I think it's also very important to mention that we are here today. Thanks largely to Bev and Paul, who reached out with Wanda early in the summer. Hey, why don't we actually do something together? Because they have this exciting research that they conducted, and it was really on their initiative and also funding that we're holding today. So Beverly, thank you very much. Please join me in welcoming Beverly.
Well, thank you. It's really a privilege to be standing here today, and I do appreciate all the work that Sonia and Wanda have put into organizing this. And I am really enjoying meeting some of these young fabulous minds that are putting a lot of attention into education in the global south, because there's so many needs there. And of course I loved hearing from Claudia, because we've spent so many years, like many decades, in Sierra Leone, and I just love that idea of the cell phones and the cell films and early marriage. Don't even get me started on that, or FGM, because that's a huge problem there. But today I am very happy to be sharing with you the results of the research that we did in Uganda. And we are, as I think Wanda mentioned, we're not academic researchers like many of you, but we are practitioners. And, I've been an international development practitioner for many years. And we had an opportunity from this Fund for Innovation and Transformation. It is a group in Winnipeg that receives its money from the Canadian government, and they were funding small and medium-sized organizations to try to test innovative solutions to development issues. And so we asked for funding, and we got it, which was absolutely wonderful. And we said that what we wanted to do, and you have to have a research question, and our research question was, does access to self-directed e-learning by Ugandan primary students improve non-cognitive and cognitive skills, promote mutual respect and understanding and acceptance of disabilities, and also contribute to the overall improvement of educational outcomes for these students? Our particular interest was in those children living with disabilities, because we had been involved with Wanda and Cause Canada in the initial research about e-learning in rural parts of Sierra Leone. But no one had ever done anything, as far as we could see, on how do you use e-learning and self-directive e-learning for children with disabilities. But then, of course, you can't just go into communities and say, well, I'd like to have only the children with disabilities have computers or tablets. Like, that would have been very bad. So we didn't do that. We decided we would have the program for all children. First of all, as I said, we were interested in cognitive learning skills, so the math and literacy skills. And we were also interested in non-cognitive skills, which, as many of you know, are more important in many ways. Self-confidence, intrinsic motivation, and their level of aspiration. These are all really key for learning. So we wanted to look at all of these things. But in addition, we wanted to look at it from the perspective of children living with disabilities. So we first of all, for the cognitive and the non-cognitive, we went back to the research that we had done in Sierra Leone, where Sonia was very wonderful and helped us with that. And we adjusted it for the new context of East Africa. But we thought, okay, we've got to have some sort of a questionnaire that we can give to people to try to gauge the attitudes between children living with disabilities and those without in the classroom. So we found a scale that was created by McMaster University, and it's called the CATCH, which is Chodoki-McMaster Attitude Toward Children with Handicaps. And it was a simple questionnaire that you gave, and you gave CATCH A to the children who had no disabilities, and CATCH B to those who had the disabilities. And there was like a mirror image. So you'd say, you'd ask the child with disability, do the other kids in class stand up for you when you're bullied? And then you'd ask the kids with no disabilities, do you stand up for the kids who have disabilities? Do you stand up for them when they are bullied in class? And the questions related to things like level of comfort. Are you comfortable with a child with disability sitting beside you in the classroom? What about the level of fear? Are you afraid of kids who have disabilities? The ease of communication. Do you find it easy to talk to someone with a disability and then a child with a disability? Do you find it easy to talk to the other children in your class? And then also we were interested in socialization. How much do they interact together? So it was kind of interesting to be using not only the the questionnaires for the disability question, but also the math, the literacy, and the non-cognitive skills. So for the baseline, we had math tests, literacy tests. We had those CATCH questionnaires. We did interviews, and I hate to admit this to people who are doing your academic research, but I called Wanda up and I said, how many people do we have to interview? Like we had 1,200, and since I had never had a statistic course, I thought, well, maybe Wanda would know, but we didn't know. So she says, why don't we just do all of them? So we did all of them. So we have the best data that probably any of you researchers have, because we interviewed everybody, like a 30-minute interview, 1,200 students, plus all of this other. And then we wanted to triangulate with focus group discussions. So we had teachers, students, girl students, children with disability, the parents. We covered the waterfront, really. So what did we do? We asked our partner, which was the Chininga Child Development Clinic in Uganda, and they'd been working for 7 years with children with disability. We said, could you find us 10 schools where rural schools, they have to be as similar as possible, and they have to have children with disabilities as well. So they found us 10 schools, and economically about the same, not too many rural or urban. We tried to get them, pretty uniform, which was actually impossible, but we tried our best. And then we said, put the names in a bag, and then pick out 3 to start with, and that was our control school of 300 grade 5 and 6 students, and the rest were intervention schools. And then we decided that we would, as you all have done, I'm sure, disaggregate everything by gender, grade, disability, and school. And here's a picture of our students very conscientiously doing their exams for the baseline testing. The only thing I'm going to mention here is that we were very enthusiastic in 2020, in February and March 2020, and we did a bang-up job of a baseline study, and guess what happened? My husband Paul and I were there. We just worked with the staff to do a baseline, and then we get a call. Well, Trudeau put out saying all Canadians must come home because of COVID, and we got one of the last flights out of Uganda, and then they closed down all the schools for 12 months. So we had this fabulous data, and we couldn't use it a year later. And so we thought, okay, the schools opened up in 2021. We'll go in there, we'll do this all over again, all those thousands of interviews and everything. So we did that, and then several weeks later, they closed the schools down again for another about 9 months. So it was really a tough process for us. But because we had all of that data before COVID, and we had all of that data 1 year into the pandemic, we had really interesting data and about the impact of COVID and the closure of schools on all of these children. So it was actually an interesting, inadvertent kind of research we ended up doing. I'm not going to say too much about the Rachel because Wanda did a wonderful job, but we used the Rachel. We loaded on it not only all those things that she showed, all the apps that she had showed you, but other things specific to children with disabilities and also to Uganda. And then we set up learning labs in 30, in all 10 schools. Oh no, sorry, in 7 out of the 10 schools, and there were 30 tablets in every school. Now, what were the results? Well, we looked at, as I say, girls and children with disability. We did many different things. We looked at average math scores, for example. We also broke it into tiers so that those who failed, below 50, then 50 to 74 and 75 to 100. And we looked for improvement because it ended up the schools weren't actually all equal. Some of them were really good and had fabulous teachers, were known to have that. So we looked at improvement. So for girls, the average math score improvement went up in the intervention schools by 30% and control schools by 17%. The children with disability, their average math scores improved by 29% in intervention and 20% in the control schools. So we were, quite pleased with those results. In literacy, we had similar significant results, at least we considered so. Students, and this one was interesting, students with intellectual impairment, their literary scores, they improved by 29% from baseline to end line. And at the control school, those students, same students with intellectual impairment, improved by 22%. Now, a few little things about that. Which child is intellectually impaired? Well, I mean, we're in very rural Uganda. There weren't a lot of psychologists or, people who would really understand or have criteria for who is intellectually impaired. So we asked the teachers. So, I was a little skeptical because we also did by tier, and the intellectual impairment ones, they improved into that third tier, where they were 75 to 100, quite a few of them. So I'm thinking, what went on there? Maybe our program was just totally wonderful and self-directed e-learning really works, or else, did they, decide to label students inappropriately? We can't tell for sure. On literacy for girls, again, we had a 24% improvement from baseline to end line, and in the control schools, 16%. But we made some mistakes along the line. For instance, one thing, and I don't know why we didn't think of this ahead of time, we lumped together all children with disabilities. Well, I mean, really, you've got children with intellectual impairment, you've got children who can't hear, you've got children who can't see, children with cerebral palsy. Are they all the same? Obviously not. So, by midterm, we did a midterm evaluation as well. We started breaking that down because we were interested, well, how did the deaf students do? How did the children with visual impairments do? But we found out at the midterm the children with the hearing impairments were not doing as well as everybody else. And so we went back and looked on the Rachel, and sure enough, we hadn't done a very good job of loading material that they could access without hearing. So we hired a fellow, and I think this is actually Wilbert right there, who was 16 years old at the time, cerebral palsy, could barely walk and could not speak one word. However, he was a genius on computers. And so we hired him to look, and this is not an easy job, look all over the internet for educational resources for children who had trouble hearing that were offline, because we couldn't put anything. There are lots for online, but offline was not easy. He did a fabulous job, and by the end, and I'm just going to get my statistics here, it was quite amazing. By the end, the hearing impaired students in the intervention schools enjoyed an improvement. They scored, at the very beginning, they only was 6.5% scoring in that top tier, but by the end, 60%. We're scoring in the top tier. And again, that's self-directed e-learning labs. On literacy, 50% of the hearing impaired students from the intervention schools scored in the top, top tier, and but that increased to 70% by the end of the project. So they really made a difference for these kids on their own. But one of the things that we realized once we'd done all this research is we don't know why. We did a similar mini conference at University of Calgary, and the professor that we were working with, he said, "Bev, you need more research." So this is an appeal to you folks. He says, yes, you know that you had all this significant improvement in the math, the literacy, and I'm going to talk about the non-cognitive soon. You do not know why. And it's true, we don't. So if anybody's interested, please let us know. But we've got some theories, and one of the theories about the girls is that, there is still a culture of violence in schools, right? They get caned, and if you ask a question that's not a good question, you're going to get caned. So, I mean, girls in particular are quite quiet in the classroom, but here, in these after-school e-learning labs, they could ask whatever questions they want on the computer, right? They could pursue anything of interest to them. So they really enjoyed it, and their marks were even better than the boys on that. But as I say, we were also interested in the inclusion of children with disability. And what was interesting is the level of comfort. So we asked, as you remember, we asked the kids, are you comfortable with the children living with disability sitting right beside you, right? And 90% of children without disabilities in the intervention school, compared to 67% of students from control schools, didn't mind if a child with a disability sat beside them. And we had several other questions, but it was the same difference from beginning to end. And again, why? I mean, the only thing we can hypothesize is that this is brand new technology. I mean, none of these kids had phones, right, or computers. So, and when we had the e-learning lab, all the other kids in the school would crowd in the windows just to watch them do it. I mean, this was novel, right? And so the fact that you've got a child with a disability sitting right beside a child without a disability working on their self-directed e-learning, I think they're kind of looking and saying, gee, I didn't think they could do that. And you'll see, I'm going to show a short video at the end of a child, a girl with epilepsy. And she said, no one used to talk to me, but ended up she was brilliant on tablets. And so all of a sudden everybody's coming to her. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons that we think, but we need more research, as I said. So the level of fear decreased. Maybe I think I've got another one here. The increase in self-confidence, this is for all students, and even more particularly girls with disabilities. The interest in teamwork went way up in the intervention schools. Increased self-motivation, they said, the question was, do you like to do extra work on something that interests you? And in the e-learning lab, folks, the intervention students, theirs was much, much higher. So it was quite interesting. And then expression of empathy for children with disabilities. We found that there was definitely that increase in that. We were also very interested in gender equality, and the question, are girls smarter than boys, was sort of a silly question, really, because guess what happened? The girls said that they're smarter than the boys, and the boys said that they're smarter than the girls. We didn't learn a whole lot with that question. However, we asked 3 different questions related to should boys or girls be prioritized for going to school. And at the beginning, pre-COVID, pretty much should boys go to school or girls go to school or should both? Pretty much all the kids said both. But after COVID, in our second baseline, we found out that actually even the girls were saying that boys should be prioritized. And the way we put the question was, if there are few financial, or if there's a lack of financial resources in your family, in your home, should boys be allowed to go to school or girls? And the girls were even saying the boys should be prioritized. So it was actually quite sad because, and those of you who are studying economics, you'll realize there was a huge impact of COVID, especially on people who were already poor. They went from poverty to extreme poverty. And children with disabilities, often they didn't get to eat. And we found that there was a higher incidence of children with disabilities who actually died during the pandemic. So it didn't surprise us, but it alarmed us that even the girls said the boys should go to school. Now that turned around a bit more by the end line after they had a whole year of schooling, so that was very important. Now this is just the last slide here. This is my husband Paul on a trip just a few months ago, and these kids absolutely adore these tablets, and he was there on a spying mission. So he was sitting in the middle and looking to the left and looking to the right and looking in front and back. What were the kids studying on self-directed e-learning? And one was looking at geography of East Africa, and one was on the African storybooks, and one was wanting a canned tutorial on math. And it was really quite amazing to see what they were doing, and they were just totally thrilled with this. So that is my presentation, and if you have any questions, should we do it now or later?